Okay, we're back. We're live at 5 here on the Monday, and we're here with Russell, Will Rodgers. We're going to find out more about the Will Rodgers part of that. He's the principal of Pacific Rim Business Consulting.
Consultants, indeed.
And we're going to talk about business consulting here in Hawaii, and we're going to call this show In Community Matters because they do, or it does. Community Matters. It does. Okay? We're going to call it Go for Broker.
Sounds wonderful. Nice to see you, Jane. Thank you very much.
Nice to see you. It's been a while, Russell.
Been a bit, but
Great to have you in the
look
studio.
well. You look very well.
Thank you. You look well, too. And you sound well.
Well, thank you very much.
In the way of introduction, among other things, Russ is a radio guy.
Well, a long time ago, about 13 years old, I walked out of the bedroom early one morning and my mom said, "Your voice changed." And I think that was probably the beginning. Other than that, it's been around for many, many years.
And you've done radio broadcasting in a number of places, too.
I have. It was fun. Started in college at WKME Radio, Shaw Hall, Michigan State University. Back when we had a great football team and a fullback called Bob Apisa, went to Farrington High School.
Ooh.
Dick Kinney, the first barefooted kicker
wow.
in the in all of collegedom, if you will. But those were great football days, so enjoyed it a great deal.
And you and I talked about, what was it, in the Banyan Tree Plaza? It was Hawaii Calls.
Yes, Hawaii Calls indeed. A show that lives in infamy, literally. I mean, it was one of the things that people, actually worldwide, it was pretty much concentrated on the mainland, but it was the kind of stamp of Hawaii at the time when radio was at its absolute peak. People enjoyed it forever, and if we had something similar come back, that would be wonderful as well.
Well, I feel that one day it would come back, and when we talked about it, I went and I looked to see whether Hawaii Calls was an available domain name. No such luck.
No such luck.
And that was the one with the brand. I mean, I would say that no radio show has affected a single place, the way Hawaii Calls affected
without
Hawaii.
a doubt. I mean, Abbott and Costello did it with humor, and Hawaii Calls would have done it with Hawaii, and offering the cultural side of the islands in just a really pleasant way that people thoroughly enjoyed.
Hapa music.
Yeah, everything was modern at the time. The soldiers from World War II had come home, and they didn't really want to leave that mentally behind, so they would tune in. It was just a really, really nice format.
Sure, and Hawaii gives that sort of gift. The aloha spirit traditionally has been a gift that you give after somebody leaves Hawaii.
I speak about that literally all the time on my radio show because Hawaii is one of those very special places from a business standpoint where our unofficial ambassadors are the people who service in the restaurants. They have no idea whether it's the former ambassador of wherever. They're there doing their job day in and day out. And they really are responsible for pushing that out there. And I've had the privilege of my life of traveling to maybe 45 countries in the world, Argentina, all over South America, so on and so forth. But the boil down is, they all know Hawaii, and they all understand that it's a special place for its aloha spirit.
We've got to keep that. Got to keep that. A good buddy of mine, until he died, was a fellow named Rick Davis. Davis was, actually, he'd been a stockbroker.
Oh,
but one day he decided he wanted to trade on the aloha spirit, so he created a magazine called Aloha, the magazine of Aloha. And where he made his money, and he made some money on that, was that the tourists would come, and he would, somehow have them sign up. And when they went back to Minnesota, let's focus on Minnesota here, and it was freezing cold, right? They would love to get a glossy magazine
with
all these pictures of the beach and the surf and sand, and he sold them by the hotcakes.
Well, look at Hawaii 5.0 modern day. In a sense, it's still trading on that memory thing that we all have for the islands. Once you've been here, you visit, you really mentally never leave. So it's a wonderful time to come back, visit the show for an hour, see the scenes and say, oh, I remember Kalakala Avenue, or I remember Diamond Head.
Yeah, even though they always get the streets wrong. You know, you see the car chase and, and it's a sort of gap 20 miles later, you know, 1 second and 20 miles.
Exactly. Well, you know, movies are wonderful things, and shooting them, production people are some of the most talented in the world.
So you are doing a radio show right now?
Yeah, we do it every Saturday on K108 AM. It's called the Hawaii Small Business Marketplace. We like to say we are the heart and soul of small business in Hawaii, and we encourage people to call us, interact with us. We try to talk about the issues of the day here. We like all business, of course, but we like to focus on small business. And I mean small business. We have about 80,000 business licenses here on the island of Oahu. Many real estate people make up a lot of that count, but we have roughly 15% of our employment, as an example, is the restaurant business. That's a lot of folks. But these businesses are not massive in size. They're not Dillingham, they're not Young Brothers, they're not, you know, they may be 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 people, but they are very, very important to the Hawaiian economy.
Absolutely, the mom and pops.
Yeah, no question about it.
Just like we need to sell the Hawaii brand overseas, we also need to keep our mom and pops.
Absolutely, they're an integral part of our daily routine, and they have that special presence of serving both our #1 industry, the tourist, but also to smile when they deliver some local service. And that's quite different. I've been in some places in the world where you could say they're somewhat the same, but it's something very special here on the island.
We have to hold on to it.
Yes,
you know?
absolutely have to hold on to it.
Not that it's directly apropos, but in the morning paper, there's a story about a federal program that funds agriculture. And the stats were there are 7,000 farms in the state. The average farmer is something, I think it was 60 years old. This is
All right, and probably about
really
5
scary.
acres in size. That's about the size
Right,
of
that's
the,
what
very
that was in the paper.
small.
It's very small. And right now, this program is doing some 30 people, 30 families or recent graduates from UH who studied something in agriculture, and it hopes to do another 30. And I'm saying, is that enough to keep up, you know, with the diminution of farms by virtue of the retirement or death of these, you know, 7,000
Very difficult.
farmers?
I mean, 90% of our food is imported, 90%.
Yeah.
Every time we take 1 percentile away from that, it has a snowball effect in the Hawaiian economy. So small farms are just as important as any other small business, and they probably provide actually more per capita employment than a lot of other types of businesses. The state of Hawaii does have a student to farm program, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
If anyone's interested.
It's part of that
Yeah,
article.
it's all part of that continuum that has to start at the local level and move all the way up to the federal level.
Yes, right.
I was born and raised on a farm, and we considered our
Not
farm
in
to be
Minnesota,
small.
not
No,
in
in Michigan.
Michigan.
So
It's not too
we still
far.
know where it's cold, but
Right, okay.
the farm I was born and raised on was 80 acres, and that was considered fairly small.
Yeah.
That simply would be a magnificent farm here. So
We have a long way to go before we take these mom and pop or, you know, single proprietor farms or maybe husband and wife farms and move them into large acreage. Because why? Because land is so expensive.
Oh, absolutely.
Even farmland, and you have to accumulate capital.
Well, we have a conundrum always of development versus farms. About the Eva Plain, for example, was our farm territory for years, and now it's been virtually enveloped by development. But there's some unique things going on. The developer has a program out there where if you buy a home, build a home, and then agree to farm from the land, you will get special consideration.
From the developer.
Right. And we have things in farming that are also teaching us to grow vegetables on walls, if you will. I know there's
And spices.
Yeah, all kinds of things that may make more sense.
Yeah.
There's a movement toward Hawaii growing its own tea, as an example. We're starting to grow tea on the Big Island.
No reason why we can't do that.
We should, because it's a diversified product. Again, it gives us the ability to get some dollars and put them here in our marketplace.
Right, and we can associate the tea with Hawaii. You know, people will, I don't think it'd be hard to do that association.
No,
People
no,
will say
not at
Hawaii
all.
tea, Hawaii
Why not?
famous for tea, macadamia nuts, tea, you know,
Yeah,
papaya,
we
all
had,
that.
if you think about it, coffee is relatively new to the islands.
Coffee too.
In the middle 60s, it was here, but it really wasn't anything dominant. Now, Kona coffee and Hawaiian coffee in general, last time I was in Florida, I went to
World-class.
Costco, and there it was on the shelves of Costco.
Yeah.
Hawaiian coffee. So we have the ability to do it. There's no question about it.
Sure. Kealakekua, famous for that. Kona coffee.
Kona coffee, absolutely.
So now you seem to know a lot about small farms. Is that because small farms are part of your book of business?
Well, I would love them to be. I would welcome the sale of a farm, just as I would welcome the sale of a restaurant or a small manufacturer or a body shop or anything else.
Well, let's take a moment and,
yeah.
and find out what Pacific Rim Business Consulting does and what a business broker is. Go for broker, you know.
Okay, thank you.
You know, tell you the truth, in the way of background, you know, there are too few business brokers in the state of Hawaii. I know this because I practiced law for 40 years here.
You did indeed.
And
yeah.
our mission was always to try to find a business broker who would help, you know, people locate the other side of the transaction. It was very hard to do because it's hard work, let me add that. So tell us what, at least you see, a business broker doing.
Will do. Well, we generally work in three areas. One is the sale of a business. The second is valuing that business. And the third is consulting with the business owner slash LLC slash LLP or whatever it might be to position themselves for the eventual sale of the business, because it's a little different than selling your home. Although you think long and hard about it, once you make a decision to sell your home, it's really not that much of a push to get it ready and go on the market with it. On the other hand, if you don't properly prepare a small business to go on the market, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And as a business broker, our job is to take the communication channel and open them up between the buyer and the seller in such a way that they both feel like they're not cannibalized. Unfortunately, business brokers in some cases have had circumstances where, well, all they care about is selling the business, they don't care about the buyer. It just doesn't work that way in business, in my opinion.
You don't want it to fall apart the day after the closing.
No. I would love to sell every business to every buyer, but it simply doesn't work that way. And many times, buyers have motivation that is triggered by a personal need of some kind. I just lost my job. And they're asking themselves, do I want to go back into the corporate world, or do I want to do what I really wanted to do when I was X years old?
Well, a footnote to that is that in our time, and in Hawaii, maybe we're not leaders in this, but we do have it, you can have a life with multiple chapters.
Indeed, yes,
You
well
know,
said.
it's not,
I like that.
It's not just, you know, cradle to grave, one job, which is what it was for a long time.
Oh, indeed.
But now people have the freedom, you know, both financially and, you know, in terms of their own way of looking at things, they have the freedom to see, to envision another chapter in their life. And the business, the kind of business they always wanted to have, is conceivably that chapter.
I hear this a lot. It's a lot more than I would have, let's say, 20 years ago. I was born and raised after the farm, lived in Flint, Michigan, which was General Motors town. I went to high school where virtually everyone who graduated went to work for General Motors, saying, I have nothing else to worry about. All I need to do is spend my 20 years and I'm out. Well, you know what those folks are doing today? Many of them still looking for a job.
Yeah.
So ultimately, to prepare yourself to go through multiple careers is pretty darn good thinking, frankly.
We recently had a guest who talked about that, who talked about the rug being pulled out from under all these auto workers in that area where, you know, they didn't see it coming. And all of a sudden, the security that they thought they had at day one, lifelong security, wiped away.
Wiped away.
And just like those workers, you know, we're going to be wiped away for about a minute here, actually, Russ.
Okay.
We're going to take a short break. Russell Will Rodgers, we didn't get to the will part
We'll get
yet.
to the will part, okay.
Pacific Rim Business Consulting, here on Community Matters, because it does. Go for broker. Brokering small businesses in Hawaii. You'll see, we'll be back right after this wipe away. Yeah. Hi,
My name is Seymour Kazimirski. I have a show called Seymour's World on ThinkTech Hawaii. Our show is about opening minds and facilitating conversations. To tell you the truth, I have no idea what we're going to be talking about. I have no idea who our guests are going to be, but I guarantee you we're going to have lots and lots of fun. Aloha from Seymour's World.
Ted Ralston, folks, host of our show at ThinkTech Hawaii called Where the Road Leads, where we talk about technology influencing the future of Hawaii. Technology, of course, is the art of solving problems. We always bring in interesting and informed guests who can see from different perspectives and different points of view how that future might unfold and how technology can assist us in getting there. So once again, join us 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock on Fridays. Ted Ralston, your host. And please, if you have ideas that you'd like us to address on this show or folks who you think should be on it, let us know.
Okay, we're back. We're live. I'm Jay Fidell. This is Russell Will Rodgers, Pacific Rim Business Consulting, Gopher Broker, here in the community of Community Matters. And before we go too much further, what's with the Will Rodgers, Russ?
Well, it's real. Now, this is an interesting sidebar. My middle name was Willis. The short form is Will. And when you are in our business for the long haul, you like to have a name that's well recognized. So I just captured my middle name, shortened it to Will, which was appropriate, left the last name alone. And so a lot of folks know me as Will Rodgers. And that's quite all right. I'll answer to both. My mom said that my center name, if you will, or middle name, is one grandfather. My first name is my other grandfather. So that's how it all came about.
Now, if you want to tell, any jokes here today or spin some rope, as I remember, he spun rope while he did that.
Well, he was a great humorist.
Feel free.
One day I'm at Oklahoma. You can see his museum yet to this day. He seemed to have the ability to capture the political thoughts of the day and turn it into humor without getting anybody real upset, and that was to his credit.
Well, this is not too far from Webley Edwards in the Moana Hotel.
Yeah, exactly. Webley Edwards. You've got that was the guy who made it happen on Hawaii Calls for sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Anyway, you spoke about the 3 elements of being a Gopher broker, and one of them was sale. Another one is valuation. Another one was consulting, and I'm really happy you broke it down that way because that's a great track for our discussion.
It's most things that get simplified are going to develop themselves quicker than trying to be too intricate about it. But the sale is simply that. We provide a way for the owner of the business, and that can be a law firm, that can be any we don't care. It really doesn't matter what type of businesses. We provide a format where we can sit down and discuss how to prepare themselves. If they're ready to go, we then will take the features, advantages, and benefits of that business and present them to the worldwide market.
Now, you spoke earlier about the need to clean things up at some point. And you mentioned, I certainly agree, that if you as a seller don't clean them up, you're going to suffer.
Oh, it's
in ways that are unimaginable because you'll have to pick them up under pressure later. So the question is, when this fellow comes to you or decides to sell his business, whatever way, is he already cleaned up, or do you have to clean him up after he decides?
I would say the chances are probably 60-40 in favor of not being cleaned up. The majority of people really kind of have an idea what they think their business is worth, which, in all fairness, is usually wrong. And they think they're ready to go. And one of the first things I'll do is, may I see your profit and loss statements? And I'll glean through them pretty quickly, and I can tell with years of experience where they're coming from, what's going on. And to make a long story short, if their books are not in order, we have a real tough situation on our hands.
We'll try to find value.
Yeah, because if you can't prove value, you are never going to prove potential, and potential never gets a loan. So unfortunately, it's not going to happen.
Loan by the buyer.
Exactly.
So you're not actually talking just to the buyer, you're talking to the buyer and the buyer's bank.
And the buyer's bank, because the bank is not going to risk money unless they see a return on their investment. So that sale process starts there.
Okay, so when you first talk to somebody, I guess one of the early questions is, are you shaped up?
Yeah,
And if you're not
exactly.
shaped up, we got to get you shaped up. Am I right about this? Before we go public on your
Correct.
business.
Correct.
Because otherwise you won't be prepared.
Exactly. That's why the three things come to bear. And if we really look at it and see that there's a lot of work to be done, then the consulting side comes in pretty quickly, because I would say something like this to them: why don't you go ahead and put me on your payroll for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, whatever it takes for us to get this together, because the result will be a tremendous benefit for you.
Okay, getting it together, that's an interesting, it reminds me of one of the basic rules I see anyway, is that every business needs a website.
No
That
question.
is appealing to the
Right,
public.
by
and
social media.
Okay.
Absolute.
And every time you put a new website on a business, you wind up changing the business. Because the website, as you examine the business to build the website, you're improving the business. You're making the business conform with your ideal as reflected in the website.
Absolutely. Your website is your brochure of yesterday.
Yeah.
And if it is not current, if it's not active, if it's not up to date, these are all things that buyers will check.
Yeah.
I had a circumstance just the other day with a buyer I'm going through, and I looked at the buyer seemed all together, et cetera, and then before I met them, I looked at their Facebook. Their Facebook didn't say they lived in Hawaii. It didn't say what they did. It simply was old. And my first piece of advice to that buyer was, get it up to date, because I guarantee you, when you go to the bank to borrow the money, the banker's going to look on your Facebook. And if you can't keep that kind of detail managed correctly, your character becomes questionable to them.
Sure.
They want payback.
Sure.
They don't want personality wins, so to speak.
Right. So it's got to be institutional to a certain
It has
extent.
to be institutional, tell the story, and then obviously social media has brought the interactive phase. How can you get that website to interact with a potential customer? We get so little, we don't have this problem in Hawaii so much, but I think it's like 1.5 seconds the human mind is capable of looking at a billboard. One of the reasons radio is so popular here in Hawaii is because we don't have billboards. We are the verbal billboards, if you will. But if you don't get their attention immediately, the website can only act as a dormant brochure. But if you get them to do something,
Anything.
pick up the phone, send me an email, read my newsletter,
Sign up.
read my blog, get upset at me and write back, any of those things, those are all good.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, what about the books and the records? That's got to fall in there somewhere too.
Well, the first clue that's usually a problem is I do the books myself. That's a first clue. Now, if they graduated from the University of Hawaii with a degree in accounting, that's probably okay. But the one I like to hear is, I'll have to check with my bookkeeper, and that sounds better. Bookkeepers are very good at what they do most of the time. So ultimately, you want to make sure that the numbers are correct and that the chart of accounts is appropriate for that business. So there's a lot of things that have to be switched around. If you're in the restaurant business and you're using a chart of accounts in the tour business, the industry won't recognize that. Eventually, the lender who wants to lend you the money to buy the restaurant looks at this and says, gee, I thought this was a restaurant. You're showing me a tour company.
So tell them what a chart of accounts is.
Oh, chart of accounts is simply the roadmap that's used in accounting for you to identify the sales that come in and the expenses that go out, showing the net operating income before debt.
Okay. It's the categories.
Yeah.
Where the money
Yeah,
fits.
it's the insurance you pay and the wages you pay your employees, the electricity bill.
So if you had an item for linens, that would be a restaurant.
Quite likely. Might be hospitality, might be a hotel.
Okay,
That would be,
yeah.
but they do have slightly different charts of accounts because.
And you can make your own.
You can make, you can, but the guys with the money won't like that. They like to see it channeled correctly.
Right.
Why? Because they're going to measure your business against every other business in its category.
Feel comfortable with something
exactly.
they've seen before.
So it's almost like putting a Frenchman and an Englishman that neither can speak either language beside each other. They might become friends, but they're probably not going to be very productive. You got to get them speaking the right language.
But what about a business? You talk about restaurants. I mean, it's a good place to start about restaurants. You know, I don't want to tell you anything you don't know, but there are
I learn
some
something new every day.
restaurants keep 2 sets of books.
Well,
One is for the Internal Revenue Service of our great nation, and the other is not.
It's one of those problems a business broker runs into all of the time. All I can say to the folks out there is, don't do that. Pay your taxes. Make sure that you are reporting the business fairly, because when you ask a business broker or any professional, your attorney, your accountant, and so forth, to come in, if you are taking money out of the business and not reporting it, you're asking all of them to be complicit with you. And you can't do that. So my advice is, when someone comes and says, well, I've been doing this, I want to sell my business, it may take a year or 2 before they work themselves out of that and eventually say, here is the true picture of the business.
So sometimes you're going to say to them, nice idea to sell your business, but really we have to straighten it all out. It's going to take a little while.
Absolutely.
Before we go public on this, because right now you have so many issues that it is.
And valuation, the second one, it comes in this way. For example, many small business people have done a wonderful job all their career, but they and they alone have run the business. There's nobody to replace them. That type of business is actually less valuable and less saleable than a business that's been managed its way out of the original founder.
Yeah, sure.
That's very important. The other thing, 2 types of businesses that I sell, really, the industry sells, my whole domain, if you will. One is essentially selling a job. So going back to the people who lost their job, if you don't want to ever be fired again, start your own business. And if you like working with your hands and you're good at it and you can make money at it, you can go buy a business that will allow you to do that as long as you want to do it. And that's wonderful. The other type of business is a business that has an idea and can be transformed into scalability. And there are a couple of shows I love on television. One's called The Profit, for example, and another is called Bar Rescue, which is another one that's pretty interesting, as well as the Shark Tank. That's even more familiar. What you will hear them say all the time, is it scalable? And what they are really saying is, can we reproduce this over and over and over again? And if they can, it has a lot more value.
Yeah, okay. Wow, so can you take one of those hands-on businesses and make it scalable? Is there a transformation possible?
You can, but you have to be really dedicated to do it. You have to figure out what you do well and get rid of the things you don't do well. As much as they may be in the stable for the moment and making you a little bit of money, it's hard to throw away money. So ultimately, it takes some real tough dedication. But once you find something that you have found and created your own, as we would have said at our MBA program, your economic niche, protect it around from competition, and then duplicate it over and over again. It doesn't matter what type of business you're in.
You should take your hands off it. You have to become management, not labor.
That's the whole objective. So I have another business that we're speaking of today, speaking about that today. They have learned how to make a certain type of food a very special way that's very popular. And they sell lots and lots and lots of that food, but they're really a small supermarket. They're at that point where they have to decide what's the best way to go here. Now, could the supermarket be sold and simply support a family, for example, or 2 or 3 people? Sure, it could be done. And that may be the job for life that everybody is looking for.
And most of them are like that, actually.
And that's okay. That's absolutely okay. But the other entrepreneur will be looking and saying, aha, I see what's so significant about that single piece of food, and I'm going to scale it.
I'm going to scale it.
I'm going to take
But
it out.
what you've told me, though, is that a lot of what you do is consulting.
Much of it, because of that.
Without necessarily getting to a sale, just building it
yeah.
better as a better business.
Sometimes you have to look at it this way, that you have to enjoy what you do here, because no one, including me or anybody else who gets motivated every morning, likes to be told you're not doing something correctly. So being a diplomat's fairly important, but doing it respectfully, because people try, they really work hard. Small business people are among the hardest working people out there, without a doubt.
We're going to take a short break. That's Russell Will Rodgers, and we now know about the will part. Pacific Rim Business Consulting here in Community Matters. Go for broker, brokering small business in Hawaii. We'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Paul Jackson, better known as PJ, and my local interest is in sports. I have my own sports radio show at KWAI AM 1080 that you can stream live. I also have my own website, pjsportsradio.com. We have live guests in studio, and we talk about discussions and topics that everyone wants to know locally here on the islands. We cover everything from surfing to basketball to whatever's going on locally, sports-wise. We try to do our best and cover the topics in depth as much as we can. Once again, thank you for joining PJ here on Hawaii Sports Update. Mahalo.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
We're back. We're Monday. We're here with Russell Will Rodgers, Pacific Rim Business Consulting on Community Matters, because it does. Go for broker, brokering small business in Hawaii. Well, you know, in my career, I've seen a dynamic on small business here, and mom and pop business. I've seen them fold left and right. I've seen the old folks, you know, want the children to stay around
Sure.
and continue their life work, but the children have, no, they want to be brain surgeons in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they don't want to hang around. And so what happens is they leave and the thing collapses because the old folks can't handle it and they can't afford to have employees. So, you know, how do you deal with that? It's a big problem.
It is a big problem, and it's not only here in Hawaii, it happens literally all over the country. I mean, we have what I call a brain drain from the younger people. They go away to college, they get a degree in business. But I must say from my experience, the degrees in business they earn are literally for Wall Street. They're not for Main Street. So
Here or there or everywhere?
Virtually everywhere, because they're not entrepreneurial driven. There are few good programs that are, but mostly not. They're basically going to help you understand how a Wall Street company reacts and so forth. About 30% of the businesses that go on the market do sell. About 30% are passed on for some reason or another to friends, family, relatives of some kind. And about 30%, I know we're off about 10% here, but the remainder pretty much close the doors. And that's the unfortunate part. They don't really have to close the doors if they just prepare correctly.
So what you're saying, this is really important, is very nearly every business can be shaped up and sold.
Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely no question about it. Why? Because the commonality of that chart of accounts we talked about before, it's very simple. I get so much money in at the top, I pay my expenses, so what's left over is my profit. Any banker will make a loan to someone who can show that you can then pay for the mortgage or the commercial loan and still have money left over for what they call your global credit or your global life. They'll do that deal.
You know, sometimes you walk into local mom and pop businesses and you see an accumulation of junk. I mean, I'm sure it's the same in their homes. You know, they're just into accumulation and junk. And you look around and you say, how could this be a business? This has to be an extension of their personalities. And if anyone came in to try to make sense of this, or undoubtedly the paperwork behind it, it would be virtually impossible. Don't you find some that are virtually impossible?
Well, I'd be less than honest if I said they're all absolute, you know, knock them out of the ballpark, for sure. I mean, life would be just too easy. But you do find some that are simply not going to be there. I can recall another specific example. Hawaii was probably the perpetrator of the food truck industry.
Yes.
I mean, we really have a distinction there.
Yes.
I can remember in the middle 60s, seeing what we called at that time roach wagons. Unfortunately, no, I'm sorry to make that term.
All at the
yeah,
beaches.
and everybody was going out there having this great lunch, and I had the lunch, and I said, this is not too bad. Well, that philosophy went to the mainland. And you see food trucks, you see them on TV and specialty shows and so forth. But I had someone who owns a very nice food truck here came to me and said, we want a franchise, which is another thing we do in our
We should talk about that
process,
today, yeah.
You know. So by the time I shared with them what the franchise story was all about, we're not going to franchise. And unfortunately, lots of it was because when you take all that discombobulated information you're talking about, that years and years and years of accumulation, you have to be able to pull out the significant things, put them in a very structured environment, and then be able to teach that to someone else and then do it over and over and over again, i.e. scalability.
Same thing. And the banker. Also the banker.
And the banker, exactly.
So I guess we're at the point where we need to talk about valuation. And that is an art form that really very few people understand. I mean, I think you could walk into most accounting offices, they wouldn't know how to do it. They'd have to go read a book. The lawyer is the same. You have to, it's almost like a gestalt feeling. It's black magic. And you know, you can read the book and not really know what the multiple should be. So how do you reach a multiple, Russ? And what is it a multiple of?
Okay, well, a multiple is only a third of the story.
Oh, okay, all right, fair.
That one is, multiples are important.
What I mean by multiple is you take a certain number in the income of the business,
and
you multiply it by
exactly,
a factor, and the factor is different in different businesses, and you get at least a hypothetical sales price.
Right. Well, in Wall Street speak, that would be called determining the EBITDA. And
it stands for?
Let's say EBITDA before tax and debt.
Okay.
Okay, earnings before tax and
Earnings
debt.
before tax and debt.
So you have, the multiple is a quick look. Let's put it that way. It's worth looking through that window to see where you're at. But ultimately, very much like real estate, the three values are established by A, what it earns, B, what another similar business sold for, and C, how much it would cost to replace that business. That's the same formula you use on a house. It's just a lot more technical. And ultimately, the person where it gets real iffy is the person who makes that final judgment. And in some cases, you can provide, in our company, we provide properly trained people to do this. They will come back to the point and say, this business is worth $752,510. And they will be as good as you can get out there. But the big question becomes, who is determining the weight of each of those one-third situations?
Okay, 1/3 for the multiple?
Yep.
1/3 for the
business that match, if you will,
a
of selling a similar
comparable
business.
business.
A comparable, correct.
And 1/3 for?
A replacement. What if I started all over?
Started all over again. This is really
See,
valuable.
yeah,
And so different weights for those different things.
And the weights are the professionals are paid to come up with the proper weight. Now, obviously, if you own an unlicensed bed and breakfast in Kailua, that's probably one I couldn't sell.
Right.
Even though it may, all the numbers might work and everything else.
It's a breakaway.
It's a breakaway.
There's no
It's not gonna-
sustainability to it.
You can't make it,
Yeah.
can't make it
And
work.
the buyer's going to get it and it'll
Right.
fall apart.
The same bed and breakfast on the Big Island might have a real value
Yeah.
because B&Bs are allowed there and so forth. So, you know, that's an example of some things that just don't work.
So you say you can go out and, you know, call somebody up and say, make me a valuation?
Yes, yep.
Is that a person like you or is it some
Well,
other person?
I organize it, get it ready to go into the, it's
You
like,
give them the raw
it's
data.
like the attorney. You want to be really prepared when you go see Fidell's firm, because you're going to concentrate on what you see in the facts, and that will give your client the best return on their investment for your time and energy.
So you're advocating.
Yeah, advocating. Yeah, very good way to look at it.
You want to show them that it's really worth this much.
Absolutely, because when they do that, then we can come up with what we can have at the result of that is a true look from the seller's point of view and from the buyer's point of view. And guess what? The third-party banker will appreciate that as well. Although I will say the banker will require another one before it's ever done. Yeah,
his own, somebody
exactly,
who he customarily
exactly.
uses and who, you know, maybe less enthusiastic, if you will.
Very true. One of the significant things that's changing in the small business world today is that over 20, I think it's almost 25% of all financing inquiries now are coming in over the internet. And banks are fast becoming dinosaurs on the corner when it comes to this type of lending. You've probably seen the guy on television, ThinkTech. We spend up to $5 million and so forth. They're a very successful company, and they're literally phones ring off the hook.
Well, it's the same thing in real estate. You know, you value your house for $10 in 1 second.
Yes.
All you got to do is say where it is, and bang.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Unless there's something totally not right about it.
But in the business, you can turn over your records. You've got to talk about your income
we'll
and
need your
expenses.
records, and they'll need to be organized correctly.
So you need somebody like you to go there and say, not only am I telling you, you know, that this is the income and expense, but I have credibility because you know me. And I've been doing this for a while.
We take a lot of pride in that. We're not there to force them to do anything. We want to share information that they will benefit from in the long run. I think that's really the critical step.
So are there business valuators here?
Yes.
Or do you have to go on the web and get one on the mainland?
No, we have a couple of people here that are very good at it.
Ever
and
go
very
for
qualified.
a second opinion?
You certainly can, and any good valuator would encourage it.
Yeah.
Just like any good appraiser would on your home. They've done it correctly. You can duplicate it for sure.
Okay. You know what I didn't hear as a separate issue when you broke that down? I didn't hear anything about goodwill. Where does the goodwill fit in those three components?
Well, it depends on the legal form that you're selling, first of all. So if we're selling a sole proprietorship, goodwill is inherent in the sale. So one of the things we have to do is make sure we're making the offer correctly. The LLC can have goodwill as well, but the eventual effect of goodwill is that it's a write-off in the future. So when your accountant gets the purchase and sees that your goodwill was valued at $250,000, that can be written off over a 7-year period.
Right.
I
What you
believe
bought,
that's
you
correct.
bought that goodwill. Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
But in case of the goodwill, it's like, it's very subjective.
Yes.
And the best way to look at it is if I have a very nice little compact building on the corner, and I look up and see the sign, and the sign says McDonald's, and then all of a sudden I come by the next day and the McDonald's is gone, basically we've removed the goodwill. We know it's not going to have the same value, but we don't know how much.
Yeah.
So inherently it's very difficult to do, but it is becoming more and more practical to do it because branding is where the marketing people want you to go. If it's going to be a business brokerage company, we want it to be Pacific Rim Business Consultants.
That's goodwill.
Yeah, that's goodwill, ultimately. Now, what's that worth? As many times as you can repeat it, it gets more and more valuable.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the accounting rules force the buyer and the seller to come to an agreement on what the goodwill is valued at.
One last point, because we're almost out of time, and that is, all this, what you're dedicated to is the sale of relatively small businesses. And I'd just like you to tell me what you think about the connection, the place of small businesses and these transactions in the landscape of the economy of our state. How important are they in the face, for example, of big box stores coming in, offering lower prices, having more employees, greater revenue, and so forth? How important are mom and pops?
Well, my personal philosophy, and I think I'm correct about this, I really don't care about the the size of the store, it's the size of the idea producer, because for every champion and winner, there are a whole bunch more out there that are capable if they just apply themselves. We deal in businesses roughly $100,000 to $10 million. Above 10 million, then you get into the merger and acquisition side, which is a little more complicated, not that much more, but here in Hawaii, we probably would be up to 20 million, and then we're going to back off and go to an investment banker. Maybe that's a story for another show, talking about what an investment banker does. But ultimately, it shouldn't have any impact. It is not horrible that, in my view, that Target is opening tomorrow in Kailua. They're creating a lot of jobs, but those same people have the same, what we need is opportunity. Not necessarily worried about whether the jobs are there or not there. Opportunity will create jobs. Investment will create jobs. I would love, we could hear my opinions, for lack of another word, on private funds, which can be used to generate growth in the future and things like that. Capital private funds, which I think we do need here in Hawaii.
That's a very important point.
So those things are going to make good people with good intentions and good ideas will always survive and do well.
Let's leave it there. That's Russell Will Rodgers, Pacific Rim Business Consulting. We only scratched the surface here in Community Matters. Go for broker, brokering small businesses in Hawaii. Very educational, but also leads to a whole new and expanded discussion, which we'll have to have some other time.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate your courtesy.
Thank you, Russell.